Hello, fellow beings of light, and welcome to episode 16 of our podcast. This is part 7 in a 12-part series entitled 6 Degrees of Soul Separation. As in, we are all 6 degrees away from reconverging with and expanding into not only our light body, but the remembrance of the 6 soul aspects and corresponding consciousness fragments that they were separated into, including ourselves. Throughout this series, we are delving into my own personal journey to accessing, healing, and unifying the 6 soul aspects of my own. So far, we have gotten into 3 of my 5 fellow soul aspects, as well as into my light body herself in the last part. And I don't know if all of you can sense it as this is coming through, but there is a definite presence and energy surrounding me and this entire episode. I'm personally feeling it strongest in my arms, chills and heat at the same time, a lot of tingling. It is actually very possible that you are, in fact, sensing that too, because the soul aspect we will be discussing and interacting with resides within the spirit channels, the horizontal channels within which souls travel between one incarnation and the next. This soul aspect, Elira, E-L-I-R-A, has resided in those channels for a very, very, very long time, far longer than any soul is intended to. But that was her choice. She chooses to remain there. She chooses to remain there to aid others through the transition, as well as I'm sensing almost out of fear to some extent, which is actually making me very emotional right now. Sorry. I'm not going to explain that fear right now. We will get into it as we move forward with her story, her journey, and you'll likely know and sense it yourself when we get there. Oh boy. Okay. Elira, sweetie, I am going to have to ask you to slow down. I'm as excited as you are that we are finally connecting beyond just your presence. But we are sharing you and your story with others. So let's let that unfold for everyone at the same time. And you and I will have our time later. Okay, good. I am slowing her down because I think it is important to first get into what I have known and received about her prior to all that is coming through right now and her increasing presence over the last month or so when it comes to the work I have been doing. Elira is the fellow soul aspect that I have struggled with the most. When I began connecting with them one-on-one, I'm sorry guys, I'm getting hit with more of her story and I don't think it's intentional on her part or even necessarily her sharing it with me. I'm just receiving memories and connections. This episode's going to be very hard because I'm clearly not in control of the flow of information here, but I'm going to do my best. So, when I began connecting with my fellow soul aspects one by one, she was who I was meant to connect with. Fourth, but for some reason, she was hidden from me. She was not accessible the way the others were. And I can't really explain why that was beyond maybe the fact that she is in spirit form instead of being in the form of those I'm connecting with in the present. But she was kind of hidden, and I felt like there was some block there. And what ended up coming through was what we got in the last episode. Leora, my light body, came in instead, and I kind of put Elira on the back burner till a time when she was ready to come through. And even when that happened, I didn't get a lot. All I received was that. I'm sorry, this is a little hard for me to discuss, guys. I'm apologizing a lot, and I want to say I'm sorry for that, but I'm not. I know I don't need to be. What little I received of her when I did finally connect in with her on a surface level was that she was a teenager when she passed, that she was persecuted, and instead of allowing those who were attempting to persecute her and take her life because of who and what she was, she took control. She made her own choice, and she committed suicide while being chased by these persecutors. She jumped from a cliff. And part of the reason why this visual, that part of the memory is difficult for me is because I had my own experience about 10 years ago of being on a cliff and being in that state of mind. I'm clearly still here, thankfully. But it is a difficult memory for me to see and for me to talk about, even if it's in relation to Elira. That information I just shared about her, that's literally all I had to go on until, little bits and pieces here after that, but really until today. And that's part of why I'm struggling so much, because there's so much coming in all at once about her. So let's go ahead and get into that. So maybe we can get this back into a normal flow of her story and who and what she was and why she was required to make the decision that she did, a decision that she has carried a lot of guilt for. I did receive that at the time. And I think we've kind of worked through that, of where she has nothing to feel guilty about, that she should be proud that she chose her own way to leave this world instead of allowing those who were persecuting her to take her life from her in whatever way they were going to do that. And I don't even want to think about that. So let's get into what's coming through now, because it is a lot. So I'll back up a little bit to these last month or so, maybe two, where she's kind of been showing up in spirit form for me, not communicating with me, not necessarily actively doing anything as far as I can tell, but being a supporting presence as I have been receiving all of this, as I have been going through one-on-one sessions with others to connect with these fellow soul aspects and other parts of me, my parallel lives, things like that. And at some point during a course I was taking, and I think I've mentioned this before in another podcast, there was an Arcturian that came through, and the name that he gave me was Gushar. And me being who I am, I look up the names that my guides give me, because usually they're not their names in life or whatever, but they are a meaning, a personification of something that I can connect with. And so Gushar wasn't actually a name for an individual. It is an abandoned village in Armenia, which I had no connection to before. I just kind of sat it aside and, okay, when I'm supposed to know why Gushar and Armenia is important to me, I will. And apparently that time is now, because Elira was Armenian. Now, I'm not getting, when I asked her if she lived in Gushar, I'm not getting that. Maybe she was born there. That's possible. But what I am getting is that she resided in I'm probably going to pronounce it wrong, the Hayhard Monastery in Armenia, that was built during the 4th century. And this is when she was actually living. So that's her time period, the 4th century, which is way farther back than I thought it was going to be for her. This monastery was built into kind of the side of mountains or cliffs. They're cliffs in about the middle of Armenia. And the monastery is where Christianity was brought to Armenia through, let's see, I'm about to look at my Google thing right quick. She's giving me a name, but I'm trying to connect it. Gregory the Illuminator. He was a saint during that time period. And this is where it's going to get very hard. And I think I'm now understanding some of my own struggles with religions and things like that. So it's important to note that this monastery was Christian in nature. Those were their beliefs. And Elira, she was a very unique soul in that this is hard for me because my inner child, my younger self, experienced the same struggles and the same judgment and the same, I don't want to go as far as persecution, but that same feeling because her, possess the same ability, and that is the ability of connecting with and communicating with and aiding those souls that are in the channels, the in between of one incarnation and the next. Now, I don't know how familiar all of you are with the Christian, Catholic, those sections of religion view that kind of ability. There's a very strong pushback against it, that it's not okay to communicate with those that have passed. It's not okay to interact with them. It's just not done. It's not okay. And if you do that, there's something wrong with you. So these skills, what Elira could do, they were on a whole nother level, and I'm going to have to get into that with her, than what most people can do, probably even what I can do. Because that was, where her superpower and her consciousness fragment lies, in the spirit, in the in-between, in the void, in source itself. So it's very hard to get into that too much, because I really haven't explored that, and I haven't been able to connect with her about that. Maybe we'll get into that. But what I think is important right now is that she was at this monastery. Can you share with me what you did there? She grew up there, so she wasn't born there. But, okay. She was born in Gushar, or what is known as Gushar, because I don't think it would have been called that back then. And her mother died during childbirth, and her father was, in a way, recruited. That's the word I'm receiving. Into this movement toward Christianity that St. Gregory was starting. And because he got caught up in this, he took Elira and they moved to this monastery as it was being built. He had a role in helping with that. And she grew up there. And as she was growing up, her abilities, her connection with the spirit realm, with the spirit channels, grew. And as it did so, she became more and more of an outsider at this monastery. I'm trying to see what happened that triggered this persecution. It's fairly obvious that it was her ability and what she was doing. Leora, can you help me with this a little bit? She helped to clean there. And she happened to be cleaning in the area around, I guess, their version of a chapel within this monastery while a session was going on. And something came through for her in regards to what they were talking about, what the sermon was giving was about, someone they were discussing. And she stepped forward and she shared what was coming through with this room, with this chapel full of members of this monastery, of the Christian religion. And I think this was the first time that all of them really became aware of her ability and what it was. She was questioned, overwhelmed with questions, and with like physical pushing in on her space about how she knew what she was saying, where she got that information from. Oh, jeez. Okay. I'm getting visuals of her being taken kind of into this underground room and being held there and just being questioned over and over again about what she said, how she knew it, where she got that information from. And she would give them bits and pieces, but that seemed to only make them more agitated, more angry, more upset, because the things she was saying didn't match with what they were receiving as far as their religion. She was physically harmed. Oh, this is not an easy episode. And eventually, she shared with them that she has this ability, that this is how she's receiving things, and just the reaction to it was very strong and it was very wrong. And she went through what I'm seeing is kind of like a trial. If I'm guessing it's almost our version of like the witchcraft trials, where they're just putting these women on trial against their beliefs. It's he said, she said, one belief system or one ability against another. And she was found guilty. She was sentenced to death, essentially. Can you share with me the connection then? How did you get out? How did you? Okay. So she was put back into whatever this cell or basement place was, pending, I'm guessing, some decision about how to carry out that sentence. And she was released by her father. He came to her aid. He opened the door to allow her to escape. And she did try to, into the hills and the hills that surround this monastery, the mountain that it's built into. But And I'm getting some help here because I have some visuals in front of me that I pulled up of this place. There's no trees. It gets like desert type mountains, desert type hills where, yeah, it's green, but there's nowhere to hide. There's no place to get out of view. And as she was trying to escape, she was seen and then chased. And when she couldn't run anymore, when they were catching up to her, she made her choice. She faced the edge of a cliff. And she took her own life to avoid whatever fate they had for her, which I can't even begin to imagine what the punishments were back then towards women or even in general. But she took her own life in the time since. She has existed in those channels, the in between of one incarnation to the next. She never moved on from there, which I will bring in now what I've been receiving as far as my specific light body and our 6 soul aspects that make her up, because we are this 13th pillar, because we are unique and serve as this vault for all of the codes, templates, and blueprints for the experiment that is our human experience. Our soul aspects, our journeys are different than others. We do not live more than one incarnation. We have that one life, and then we go somewhere different. And I can't get too much into where that is because it's only just now, recently, starting to come into my awareness that there is a place where all of the 6 soul aspects, technically 5, since all of the 6 ones should be currently living, go to after they've had their incarnation. And what I've received is that that is the place that most of you would know as Telos. It's a place in between the Earth's core and the surface. It's a higher dimension within the Earth itself. I don't think she was aware of that, though, because clearly I wasn't aware of that. So I'm not sure if that played a role in her choice or not. But as I said, she chose to remain there and remains there still so that she could aid others in the transition. And I think there's actually 3 reasons. See, I had 2 before, but I'm getting 3 now. She chose to stay and help others in those channels. And the reason I just got added on to that is that her gifts, her abilities are accepted there. Like they're believed by these souls that are passing from one incarnation to the next. They're helpful to them. They're wanted and desired, not judged and persecuted. That's understandable, I think. We would all prefer to be in a place like that. And then that third part that I mentioned earlier, fear. I'm definitely sensing a fear that if she were to reincarnate, or if she knew there was some other place that our specific soul aspects go, that she would be judged again, that she would be persecuted again, that she would go through the same experience again. And she didn't want that. And again, understandable. I hope she knows now, though, because I know she's enough of a presence in my field to maybe pick up on what I've been receiving about where the 12 pillars and the 13th us, where our soul aspects go after our incarnations are over, to Telos, to this higher dimension between the Earth's core and its surface. Yes, she recognizes that. But I'm sensing she's still choosing to remain where she's at. And that's totally okay. Because she is very much needed there. She's very much appreciated there in those channels for all that she's done. I can't even imagine, like the 4th century, how long ago that was. How many souls has she helped transition from one incarnation to the next? Oh, I'm receiving a visual of the McDonald's sign where it says how many billions they've served. Oh my God. Oh, that was funny. And thank you. I don't think that was a Lyra. I think that was one of my other guides. But it kind of lightened things up a little bit because we've been getting into some heavy stuff. And I think that's necessary to kind of lighten things up a little bit. Okay. Billions served. I also get the feeling that she believes her role in helping me is best served from within those channels, which is almost interesting to me because, as I said, I have a similar ability to connect with and communicate with those souls in those channels in the in-between, to not only connect with them directly, but through, I used to love hanging out I love old ancient cemeteries. I love antique shops because I can pick up on the residual energy, the residual stories there in those places and with those objects. I still do. It's not something I actively seek out, but I definitely do still love hanging out in old cemeteries and in antique shops because the feeling I get from kind of the collective energy of those places, it's pretty awesome. I don't know if any of you have similar abilities and have experienced that, but it's amazing. So I am curious, and maybe Lyra can elaborate and help me out here with how she can aid me in my journey from where she is at, what she can add. Yeah, I'm totally getting it. What's your superpower, sweetie? I want to know. Let's see. Normally we'd be going into the Akashic Records. I'm not going to do that here, though. I don't see that it's necessary again. Um, so let's just... I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get that today. So let's just go with, is there anything further that you would like to share with us, that you would like to bring forward to our awareness? And this is very difficult, guys, because I'm still very curious why I don't get a voice from her. Like, I can see her right now and I can feel her presence. But when I do see her, she never speaks. She just shares in other ways. Okay. Is there anything you want to share? Feel free to use me as a conduit. Go ahead, it's okay. You can speak through me if there's something that is preventing you from speaking directly. Release your judgment. Too many of you judge others for who they are, for what they can do, for what they've experienced. Before you do that, look in the mirror at yourself and take time to consider the things that others have judged you for, that others could judge you for because of their beliefs, because of their perceptions, because of their experiences. Think about how that feels when you are judged, how that would feel if you were judged by others. And recognize that those that you judge feel the same way. Release judgment. It has no place. It has no place in the realm with which I reside. And it has no place above or below either, even if both have strayed from that path. You are all one. You are all connected. You all possess different knowledge, different abilities, different appearances, and more, because you are all variations along the frequency that is source, variations in that frequency's expression. But regardless of those variations, you are all still one, all still a part of that same frequency. Allow yourselves to be different. Allow yourselves to witness, acknowledge, and appreciate the variations in others and the world around you instead of judging them. Learn from them if you like. Come on, sweetie. I know you're trying to share something with me. You can keep using me. It's okay. Do not judge yourself either. Allow others to be. Allow yourself to be. Your variation, your place along that frequency is as needed as everyone else's. You have a role, a purpose, gifts, abilities, variations of them, just like all others. And they are all needed. When you approach others, know that theirs are needed, whether they fit with yours or not, whether the frequency of them specifically is lower or higher than yours or not. Know that yours have a place and step into them and embody them. Allow yourself to be. Allow others to be. That is one of many steps back to oneness, back to our connection to all. Thank you, Elira. I know that was hard for you. I think you've been silent for so long. Words are a struggle. Don't worry, they're a struggle for most of us humans too. This episode, this part of this series, it's been very different from the others. I didn't realize it would be, but it has been. If nothing else, even if we didn't go maybe as in depth as we have with the others, I am grateful for this episode because I've finally begun receiving beyond those initial basics, which, like I said, was very hard for me to have that be all that I knew of her, of that choice that she made, especially with my own connection with something similar experience. She's got me weepy. I'm grateful that I know more about her now, that I know her when and her where. Thank you, Leora. I think this is actually tying in to something a friend and I have discussed recently. When we're connecting with, not in the context of fellow soul aspects, although it applies there, when we're trying to connect with our future past lives, do we need to know everything? Do we need to know all their memories? Do we need to do a walkthrough of their whole life? And the answer to that is no. We don't even necessarily need any of the memories at all, beyond any context they might provide to the knowledge, the abilities, the expansion or steps along their journey that those in our past, in our future, or even parallel have to share with us. Those are the things that are important, not the memories themselves. We don't need that walkthrough of their life to receive those things, to reconnect with them, to unite with them in a way that we share these things during those encounters. And as I begin to move forward with our 3 degrees of timeline separation and 6 degrees of soul separation programs, where I make it possible to build a bridge that allows continuous sharing, infinite and growing, living, sharing and expansion between all versions of yourself. Because, come on, Leora, help me out here. Yeah, she's telling me I've already got it myself. I do, I kind of do. We don't even necessarily need that knowledge and abilities. It's not about that. It is about the reconvergence. It is about seeing, feeling, and knowing that we are one across all versions of ourselves. That's really all that's necessary, is making ourselves whole, witnessing, accepting, acknowledging, kind of like Elira was saying. When it comes to others, we have to do that with our own versions as well. And once we are one, once we've formed that connection, once we've witnessed, acknowledged, and accepted that connection, that sharing becomes infinite. What I am trying to achieve to help others build that connection and to weave a framework that allows it to take hold and to function moving forward until they reach a point where they no longer need that bridge, that framework, because they truly have reached that oneness with all versions of themselves. It's a tool, it's a resource to reach that point. It's the support needed to get there. And tying back in what Elira was saying about not judging others, about witnessing, acknowledging, accepting others for their differences, for their abilities, for their sole purpose, for who and what they are. That's kind of the same thing. We need to begin doing so. And that's yet another bridge, another framework that I know I'm being called to weave and to create, to help facilitate that until we reach the point where it's second nature. So I'm excited about those things, and I'm excited as I begin to expand on what those offerings and what those missions are. And yeah, I know we've changed the website how many times now, and it's still evolving. But I've accepted that. I just accepted that we're just going to go one step at a time and continue expanding on it until it's both ready for people, and then to even expand further from that, from the experiences that are received from those offerings. this has been an interesting one. I hope, even if it was a little different, that maybe you got something from it. Maybe you received something from Elira's story, or just from her very presence through this episode, because she is here and she is very much surrounding this entire episode. And I'm sure to some extent, all of those that are watching it, whenever that might be. Join us next week for our next step in our spring's themes, where we will be once again diving into the divine feminine and the divine masculine, of re-experiencing them. And yet, some more polarity. And then again, the following week for my fifth and final soul aspect, before we start stepping into the next parts of that journey, which I'm very excited about, because not only is that a huge thing for me, but it's also going to be a huge thing for those of you who feel called to walk through the same process that I've been walking through on this journey, through our 6 Degrees of Soul Separation program. And even through the 3 Degrees of Timeline Separation one, because it's a beautiful journey, and it's important steps to be taking in our individual and collective return to true oneness with all. That's it, guys. Arishkatkati.